Everyone thinks they know the story of Julius Caesar's death. We see it in plays, in films, on television. There's a powerful man, a group of angry senators, a flurry of daggers. At the heart of it, that famous betrayal by Brutus, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" It's a line that has echoed through the centuries. It's dramatic, it's personal, it makes for a fantastic story. But what if that moment is just a legend? The real story is far messier and more shocking. The assassination wasn't just simple jealousy or a single betrayal, it was the culmination of years of political tension. To truly understand, we start with the Ides of March, 44 BC. So why did the senators truly want Caesar gone? It wasn't simply that they were jealous of his military parades, though there was certainly a bit of that. The real fear was much deeper and was all about one word: Rex, king. In Rome, this wasn't just a title, it was a curse. For centuries, the Romans defined themselves by rejecting monarchy. They had overthrown their last king and built a republic where power was shared. To the elite, a king was political horror, a return to a dark past, and Caesar began to look like a king. He'd been declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. This shattered Roman tradition. A dictator was meant to be temporary, a crisis fix. Dictator for life? That sounded permanent, that sounded like a monarch. Caesar put his face on coins, gods, long-dead ancestors. Senators saw this as arrogance. He placed himself beside the divine, above other Romans. Stories say he received senators while sitting, a shocking breach of etiquette. He appointed his friends. He promoted loyal soldiers to important posts, bypassing aristocratic careers. It felt like their world was being dismantled, piece by piece. Then came the public stunts. At one festival, Mark Antony tried to place a royal diadem, a crown, on Caesar's head. Caesar refused, the crowd roared. The senators were not fooled. The plot to kill Caesar wasn't hatched overnight by a handful of hotheads. It was a carefully organized conspiracy involving as many as 60 senators, a veritable club of Rome's most powerful men. They called themselves the Liberatores, or the Liberators, which tells you everything you need to know about how they saw themselves. They weren't murderers, they were freedom fighters. The group was a strange mix of individuals. Some were Caesar's old enemies, men he had defeated in the Civil War, and then publicly pardoned in a show of mercy. Others were, surprisingly, his own supporters who had grown disillusioned and fearful of his ambition. It was a broad coalition united by a single, terrifying belief. Caesar had to die. Gaius Cassius Longinus. Cassius was the true engine of the plot. He was a bitter, practical man who had a long-standing personal and political hatred for Caesar. He was the organizer, the recruiter, the one who fanned the flames and brought the different factions together. He needed a symbol, Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus was different, a respected philosopher, known for moral character and devotion to the Republic. His involvement was a massive coup, giving the plot a veneer of respectability. Brutus descended from the man said to have expelled Rome's last king centuries earlier. Cassius played on this lineage, leaving messages. "Brutus, are you asleep? You are no true Brutus." Brutus agonized but ultimately believed killing his friend was a tragic necessity to save Rome. The morning of March 15, 44 BC, was thick with tension and bad omens. Caesar's wife Calpurnia had been plagued by terrible nightmares. She dreamt that their house was collapsing and that she was holding Caesar's murdered body in her arms. She begged him not to go to the Senate meeting that day. Caesar hesitated, fond of his wife but not superstitious. He was also feeling unwell. He considered canceling the meeting, which sent a wave of panic through the conspirators at the theater of Pompey. Their plan hinged on him showing up. Decimus Brutus was sent to fetch him. Decimus acted quickly. He used friendly persuasion and gentle mockery. He asked if he'd let a woman's dreams dictate state affairs. He reminded him the Senate would vote on granting the color purple and calling him king outside Italy. Decimus said snubbing them would look weak and arrogant. Caesar's pride was pricked. He changed his mind. He decided to go. Passing the crowd, he saw the soothsayer who'd warned him about the Ides.
Well, the Ides of March have come.
Aye, Caesar, but not yet gone.
The trap was set. In the chamber, conspirators surrounded him. Tillius Cimber approached with a petition. This was the signal. Cimber grabbed Caesar's toga and pulled it from his shoulders. The others drew daggers.
Vile Casca, what is this you do?
Then the others descended. A frenzy of violence. Clumsy blades, senators wounding each other as well as Caesar, until he fell at Pompey the Great statue. A deeply ironic final resting place. While the main story of the assassination is well known, history is filled with fascinating little details that often get left out. One of the most surprising facts is that Caesar was not killed in the famous Roman Forum or the Senate House. Those buildings had been damaged in a fire, so the Senate was temporarily meeting in a hall attached to the Theater of Pompey, a grand complex that Caesar's rival had built. Caesar was ironically assassinated in a building commissioned by his former enemy, and he died at the foot of Pompey's statue. It's a detail that adds a layer of poetic if grim justice, as if Pompey himself was having the last laugh. Another hidden truth concerns the famous last words, et tu, Brute. These words were actually written by William Shakespeare over 1600 years after the event. They are brilliant theater, but they are not history. Suetonius, writing over a century after the murder, reports that Caesar said nothing at all, pulling his toga over his head in a final act of dignity. Suetonius does mention a rumor that Caesar might have said something in Greek, kai su, teknon. This translates to, you too, my child? That is more ambiguous and perhaps even more heartbreaking, hinting at a deep, almost paternal bond. We also tend to forget about the sheer panic and chaos of the moment. The autopsy revealed Caesar had been stabbed 23 times. However, of all those wounds, only one, a deep stab to the chest, was actually fatal. Most of the conspirators were amateurs, flailing wildly in high adrenaline and terror. A brutal, messy, desperate slaughter. Caesar's body was left for hours. No one dared touch it. Eventually 3 household slaves placed him on a simple litter and carried him home through a stunned Rome. The conspirators believed that once Caesar was dead, the Roman Republic would magically spring back to life. They thought the people, the remaining senators, would thank them for liberating Rome from a tyrant. They were catastrophically wrong. When Brutus, the other assassins, emerged from the Senate House, their hands and togas still stained with blood, they were not met with cheers. They were met with stunned silence, which quickly turned into fear and confusion. The people of Rome did not see them as heroes. They saw a group of wealthy nobles who had just brutally murdered a popular leader. The liberators had killed the man, but they had no plan for what to do next. This power vacuum was quickly filled by 2 key figures, Mark Antony, Octavian. Initially, Antony struck a conciliatory tone, agreeing to a truce with the assassins. But this was all a clever political move. The turning point came at Caesar's public funeral. Antony delivered a masterful funeral oration, a masterpiece of manipulation. He began by praising the conspirators, then he read Caesar's will aloud to the crowd. The people learned Caesar had left money to every Roman citizen and bequeathed his private gardens to the public. This act of generosity whipped the crowd into grief and rage. Antony then dramatically unveiled Caesar's bloody toga and pointed out the dagger holes. The mood in the city turned murderous. The Roman people now saw his death as a vicious crime committed by a jealous elite. Mobs surged through the streets, hunting for the conspirators who were forced to flee for their lives. The republic they claimed to have saved had descended into violent anarchy. The dream of restoring the old republic was dead on arrival. The civil war that followed Caesar's death was the final death knell for the Roman Republic. The armies of the liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius, clashed with the forces of Antony and Octavian at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. The assassins were utterly defeated. Facing capture, Cassius chose to take his own life. Facing capture, Brutus chose to take his own life. A tragic end for men who had dreamed of restoring Rome's former glory. Brutus, who killed Caesar for the Republic, died in a war that destroyed it completely. His ideals led not to freedom, but to his own demise and the outcome he tried to prevent. With the assassins gone, Antony and Octavian's alliance quickly fell apart. They were 2 ambitious men. Rome was not big enough for both. Antony allied with Cleopatra, facing the cold, calculating Octavian. The final confrontation was the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's victory was absolute. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt and took their own lives, ending the final opposition to Octavian. After 13 years of bloodshed that began on the Ides of March, the wars were over. The Republic remained a republic in name only. Octavian returned to Rome as undisputed master. He was careful not to repeat his great-uncle's mistakes. He knew king or dictator was poison, so he disguised absolute power behind republican tradition. He called himself Princeps, first citizen. He took the honorary name Augustus. The irony is staggering. The senators who stabbed Caesar sought to prevent a king, but their actions created an emperor. Their violence sped the arrival of the future. Caesar's death was a turning point. It destroyed a 500-year-old republic and gave birth to the Roman Empire, shaping the West for 1,000 years. The echo of those daggers never faded. It reverberated through history. the road to an empire paved with the best of intentions.